Today we've got a great malicious compliance story coming from an Australian radiographer. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, you can march a lance corporal to the chow hall, but you can't make him eat. Was in the Marines in 1987, stationed at MCAS Kaneohe on Oahu. Beautiful place to live, horribly expensive to do much of anything off base due to prices. We lived in a squad bay literally across the street from the base Burger King. Always been a fan of their product. What can I say? Our battalion's chow hall was a 10-minute walk from the barracks I stayed in. The closest barracks to the chow hall was a 7 to 8 minute walk. The chow hall was named Anderson Hall, named for a Navy Cross recipient if memory serves, and it was a crap hole. Even by 1980s Marine infantry standards. Think Biloxi Blues chow hall scene style. All the tables and chairs were broken or lopsided, no condiments, bland, over or undercooked. You get whatever they have, screw you, deal with it, you're in the infantry, or don't eat. Some of you know this feeling. If you don't know, if you're in the US military service, chow is part of the compensation you get. They don't say what, how much, or how often, but it's part of the deal. If you were not in your area at chow time and, say, ended up at the Air Wing Chow Hall, you, with your chow hall card, could eat there instead. They won't turn you down because you're at the wrong chow hall, but they will definitely keep track of that. Since the long walk compared to Burger King in the hot humid Hawaiian sun to the aforementioned crap hole in my time was not appealing to me, I would go to the BK Lounge a couple lunches a week, along with lots of other LCPLs from my unit, as well as others that ate at Anderson Hall. The Burger King got busy, but they would do their thing and life was as okay as it gets for a Lance Corporal in the Marine Infantry not out in the field. The Air Wing Chow Hall got a lot of repeat business as well. Apparently the battalion commander through the mess hall officer got wind of this, probably due to the large number of meals being prepared and not eaten on a daily basis. Also, the other chow halls were probably benching about all the extra meals they had to prepare for irritated Marines who don't belong in their decent, well-maintained chow hall, where there are options and politeness and seconds and edible food. I can say this with confidence because orders got issued and everyone who had a chow hall card and could eat for free was to line up at their respective barracks 3 times a day, have a head count to make sure nobody was missing, and then marched to the Anderson Hall for their meal. Being the good Marines that we were, we submitted to this latest assault on common decency with all the grace you would expect from ticked-off infantry grunts. There are several types of unit movements in the Marines. Route step being one. Route step is a very casual unit march where you can be casual about the movement, talking is permitted, etc. Day 1, we went to the chow hall route step. Bench, bench, bench all the way there until we were dismissed from formation to go eat. Once dismissed, fully 2/3 of us walked away without setting a foot in the chow hall. Repeat several times a day for several days. The poor NCO who would be forced to route step us down there got so tired of the benching about bad chow and life in the infantry in general, we ended up marching to the chow hall. Imagine movie/parade unit movement, everyone in step, facing forward, looking good, and most evidently no benching to make his life just a little less worse for having drawn the short straw and assigned this task. Initially, if we were off on the weekend, we wouldn't have to march down to the chow hall. This lasted 1 weekend. Second weekend, if you were found on the barracks at chow time, in formation and off to chow you went. Most Marines were never slow on the uptake, and were scarce if in the area on the weekend during certain times. Finally, the light bulb turned on and someone came up with the idea of asking why we didn't want to eat at the chow hall. What a day, given permission to bench about your crappy conditions, with theoretically no repercussions. At first, it was the platoon sergeant with an informal bench session. Benching completed, he took his results to the platoon commander, who apparently didn't believe the 15-year veteran infantryman, so then a platoon meeting was called with a platoon commander, first lieutenant, in charge. The tone and language definitely changed, but the benching came fast, furious, and amazingly politely to the lieutenant. He reports this to the captain, who holds a company meeting, rinse and repeat. Still not good enough, Major Buffnuts from the battalion has to come down and hear the exact same thing, although much more politely. He has been told 3 times already. After our little chat with Major Buffnuts, the force marching to the chow hall stopped, and all was quiet over the weekend. Come Monday morning, the chow hall officer and the senior enlisted chef were mysteriously reassigned. replaced by the next punching bags assigned to lovely Anderson Hall. We were also told that air wing chow halls were off limits to the unwashed grunts. It got a lot better, but never good. I would like to think that Major Buffnuts or the Colonel went to Anderson Hall and sampled the wares, but that would be asking too much. Things were definitely edible after the culling, but never air wing good. Someone freaked up on several occasions, and I ended up on the Pearl Harbor Navy base and ate like a king comparatively. I think that this is the only time in my military career that benching about something bad and needing a change actually had a positive impact. So obviously, admittedly, I don't have any concept of military experience, but it's disappointing that you can have a whole infantry of people, everybody in the barracks who doesn't even want to go to the chow hall solely because it's so disappointing, and they essentially do the equivalent of spraying some Febreze on it. Congrats, it's approaching edible, God bless you for serving your country. Fish's Rule wrote, my great uncle was involved with setting up the RAAF in Australia. My grandfather was a recon pilot in World War II. Awarded an Air Force Cross, highest non-combat award in the RAAF. Spent the evening at Buckingham Palace and danced with Princess Margaret. Uncle was as high as enlisted could go in the Air Force, was in command during Desert Storm. We would ask him questions and got a lot of, I can't say anything about that. I asked my uncle once if he'd ever thought about joining the army. He laughed and facetiously replied, oh no, they get shot at. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy awesome stories of malicious compliance, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is, property management tells me not to fix anything. Okay. Back in the 2008 housing crisis, I did some work on the side for a customer's computer system. We got to talking and he had a cheap one-bedroom duplex for rent that was too good to be true. It was a detached garage converted to a one-bedroom little apartment, and it was as plain and basic as they come. The actual house was being rented out, and he was charging the full amount priced for the area, which was high, so the little garage conversation was pure profit for the landlord. I signed a lease for a fixed price that was almost half of what the going rate was for one-bedroom apartments in the area. It was no frills, plain as can be with the cheapest appliances and amenities possible, light fixtures from the early 80s, cheapest faucets and countertops money could buy. You get the visual. The elderly landlord and I had an arrangement. I could fix it up so long as I could keep the rent low, and he would allow me to pay for the remaining balance on upgrades if or when things broke. Years go by and I'm still in this one-bedroom garage conversation and making progress on updating the features. Kitchen faucet is gone. New fancy sprayer head faucet with a bar-style glass cleaner installed. Old toilet replaced with a water-saving tank and bidet installed. 80s lights are gone. LED smart home fixtures installed. Around 7 to 8 years go by, and my rent is still half of the normal going rate for the area, and my landlord is happy with our arrangement. Sadly, he has a heart attack and surgery saves his life. He's no longer able to maintain his active lifestyle and hands the reins of being a landlord to a property management company. This company is as shady and money hungry as they come. They get a percentage of the monthly rent for their role in taking over the landlord's duties. They immediately hate me and my rental agreement from the start. The month they take over, my rent goes up the maximum limit of 10%, plus 5% the cost of living increase for 1 year. I'm not happy with this, as this is a significant bump in my costs. I suck it up, but as a silent protest, I stopped making upgrades to the house that first year. Then 12 months later exactly, I get a notification that my rent will increase another 10% plus 5% cost of living increase. This is yet another blow to my finances. But I can't really complain, as my rent is still well below the average cost for the area. Another 12 months and another 10% plus 5% cost of living, followed by another the following year. This whole time I'd been saving a good portion of my paychecks as a down payment for a house, but these rent hikes were hurting my ability to set aside money for this purpose. My landlord was not happy with the property management company he hired, but couldn't get out of his contract because they were doing maintenance and facility repairs like clockwork. COVID hits and I'd been in this place for 12 years by this point. My rent was still under the average for the area, but not by much. Seeing as this was now just a crappy one-bedroom apartment, I was looking for houses to buy to get me out of this rent gouging arrangement I was in. Right at the peak of the COVID scare in 2020, a pipe burst in the kitchen and floods the floors, ruining the crappy cabinets, the carpets, and the furniture I had nearby. I had renter's insurance that covered most of the costs to what I'd lost. Not the nicest furniture, but my couch was a total loss, my desk, entertainment center, and my speaker were severely damaged. In comes property management to assess the repairs and gut out the damaged wood and carpets. I offer to pay for the upgraded wood and countertops, as well as request hardwood floors. Nope, they deny my requests. I offer to do the work myself as I'm fairly handy. Again, denied with an actual written letter stating that I'm not to do any work or maintenance on the apartment. I contact my landlord, who has his hands tied because this was the arrangement we had. I'm at a loss of what to do because this property management company is not setting me up with a temporary place to live, doing all the work while I'm working from home to watch my possessions. There is a literal door-sized hole in my wall as they spend 2 weeks fixing all the damage. They throw out my upgraded faucet, which was undamaged and worked perfectly fine, the upgraded sink, the light fixtures, the tile work I'd done, the bathroom faucet, which wasn't even part of the floor damage. They then removed an outlet, originally part of the apartment, to save on costs. I was ticked at them and complained via letters, via phone calls, and talking to the maintenance supervisor. It took 2 full months to do all the repairs, and at the end, they sent me a notice that my rent was going up due to some loophole in the neglect the apartment was in and not reported. I was done with this bullcrap, and I pooled my resources, called in all the favors I could, and found the house I wanted. I gave a 30-day notice to leave at the end of my lease, along with an invoice of all the repairs I made to the apartment over the 12 years I was there. I attached a copy of my original lease agreement, a copy of all photos I took of before and after repairs I made, a bill of the costs, and a request of a refund of the past 6 months of additional rent hike due to neglect like they stated in the letter. I had a running tally with all the receipts, work performed, and the cost of not being allowed to live in motel during the work being performed to over $9,700. At the same time, I submitted all this to the courts, as I knew they would contest all of it. My landlord was on my side during the court hearing, giving testimony he in fact allowed me in the rental lease agreement that I could do my own repairs. I won within 4 hours and was awarded $4,700. The judge removed all the billable hours I included. Judge was harsh to the lawyer for the property management, saying his client must obey the law and put a tenant up for housing during construction. Nearly 4 years later, I finally got my lump sum, including penalties and late fees, which totaled up to $7,500. Sadly, my old landlord passed away, and his properties passed to his son, who immediately fired the property management company sometime early last year. It seems like how a lot of these kinds of stories go. You have this nice agreement where things are going well and they work well for the both of you, you're both happy, and then things get just a little bit corporate and it's horrendous. Nev Bardos wrote, "That sucks that you had to go through all of that, but well done on reaming them back. Did they learn a lesson? Probably not. It's awesome the landlord was on your side too." OP responded saying, "I have no idea what happened at the end, but their lawyers fought me for a year until I was fed up and hired my own attorney. Sadly, my expenses for his services were $3,000 for him doing nothing but correspondence back and forth. Never even saw the actual guy in person, just a few Zoom meetings. But we are fighting to get them to pay lawyer expenses now. I'll see nothing of it if he wins, but might get reimbursed the $3,000. Our next story is, deleted? You sure? Okay. So I am a fiend for Excel spreadsheets. Absolutely love them, and even bought an extra wide monitor for home so I can see them in all of their glory. My boss keeps telling me that she's an advanced Excel user. She can run macros, she can do pivot tables, she knows formulas. Not once have I seen her create or manipulate a spreadsheet in the 6 months I've worked for her. So I had a template on our Teams chat that we used every week. It was automated to within an inch of its life to tell us about the company's health. We've been using it for the last 4 months after I was given approval by the boss to make it live, gave her a tutorial and everything. This was for the admins to all see it, and I'd only need to update the raw data once a week, instead of send it manually to whoever wanted it on a given day, up to 4 times a day usually. Took about 6 hours of work a week having it set up like that. Well, the boss told me to take it down because a different department who hadn't seen it was worried about personal data when one of the admins told them about it. There isn't anything like that in there, and anything that isn't open access is password hidden anyway. Our IT team has to be formally requested to add a new member to our Teams chat. The spreadsheet is password protected, the tabs are password protected, and the whole company is locked down hard anyway. So boss orders me to take it down and delete it. Run a fresh one for anyone who wants it. So I explained that there wasn't anything in it that was personal or private data, but got told, nope, delete it. Tried to explain that we use it amongst the admins every day and it has all these built-in features and tables, etc. Nope, delete it. So I did. The fallout? Read on. Cue today, boss says to me her big boss meeting is presenting figures to the executives tomorrow. She starts quoting figures that are wildly out from the true numbers. I questioned where they came from, and she shows me a Frankenstein report that is saying the exact opposite of what she thought, run by someone not even in our department. I tell her the accurate grand total and show her how I got there with a simple table and some screenshots I had of the original shared spreadsheet. She asks for access, and I tell her it's been deleted. I explained why and even showed the meeting notes where she had approved its use after viewing it. She denies any knowledge of it, but wants it back. I said it would take me 2 to 3 days to make it again due to my workload increases. I saved a copy of the template, but no way am I telling her that. This will give me breathing room to get the backlog out of my queue while she thinks I'm working on it. Let her sweat through that executive meeting knowing every figure is wrong. No one's saving her butt in this team anymore. It doesn't surprise me that OP's not going to do them any favors at this point because I can't imagine how frustrating it is to have a system that works that is figured out and based off of some rumor or nonsense worry they just say, tank it, delete the whole thing, rip it out of the foundation and throw it in the dumpster. It makes you wish in that moment that it isn't unprofessional to say, respectfully, you have no idea what you're requesting. Captain Bao Bao wrote, arrogance and incompetence often travel in the same sinking boat. This next story is train fare on expenses. This happened a long time ago in a different century. I was working for a large multinational firm with multiple sites in the UK. I was usually based in, let's say, York, but was sent on a 6-month secondment to head office in London. Everything was on expenses. The hotels during the week, evening meals, and particularly rail transport to and from London on Monday mornings and Friday evenings. At this time, I was living in digs in York, which were charged by the nights I actually slept there. So most weekends it saved me cash to go back home and stay at the parents in Reading, relatively close to London compared to York. As I was in Reading almost every weekend, I asked if I could travel from there direct to the London office, instead of driving all the way from Reading to York just to catch the dang train back all the way down to London and do the reverse on Fridays. Not unreasonably, this was agreed to by my line manager. All was fine for the first few weeks until it was discovered by finance that another colleague on the secondment had been doing similar to me but claiming for rail travel to London from her parents' house in Edinburgh, a lot further from London than York. There was a bit of a stink about the company subsidizing her travel home to Scotland at weekends, and as a result, an edict was issued that said only rail travel claims from York to London would be signed off in the future. I spoke to my line manager about my circumstances, and he referred me direct to finance. I think he knew what was coming and didn't want to be implicated. I spoke to a senior manager in finance and began to explain my circumstances, but he just cut me off and said, in a tone that would brook no dissension, that only claims from York, London would be signed off. No exceptions would be made. As a callow youth, I got the message and thereafter submitted weekly expense claims for flexible return rail tickets from York to London for almost 5 months, whilst actually traveling from Reading to London. I made a surprising amount of money from this, and combined with not needing to pay for digs and meals, I saved enough to buy a secondhand TVR car after the secondment was over. I say in this situation, it makes so much sense that as long as you can get away with it and you're not going to get busted, go for it. I just would be so paranoid about getting accused of embezzlement or trying to steal funds from the company. Scaries wrote, had a few beers. Can you break the cost down further? OP replied, I'm struggling to remember. It was a long time ago. York to London was about 65 British pounds each way. Reading to London was around 20 because I could travel off-peak and arrive in London about the same time as the York train. No idea what digs and meals were costing back then, to be honest. This was weekly for 5.5 months, so the train thing made about £2,000 over the secondment. Combined with digs and meal savings, I had about £4,500 saved. According to the Bank of England inflation escalator, 4.5 thousand equates to about 12,000 in today's money. Our next story is, don't tell you where you can't walk? Okay. Happened this morning when walking my dog at the municipal park. It has a skate park, playground, tennis club, softball fields, and, a note, a disc golf course. With disc golf, some of the holes tee off and end near the footpaths that take you around the park. While there are signs in the general area that serve as a warning, people are usually aware of the disc golfers. Anyways, I'm walking my dog and I see a group of golfers playing through, and they're throwing at a hole, that cage thingy, that's about 20 feet from the path. I stop just in case anyone overthrows. Also, it's fun to watch. I'm standing there and some grumpy old man is walking from the pickleball courts at the tennis club to the parking lot. He has to walk up to the path that I stopped at. I try to tell him, "Sir, you might want to hold on, there's a group of..." He immediately cuts me off with, "Out of my way, don't tell me where I can walk," and trudges through without looking at his surroundings. I just look at him as one of the discs sails long and connects with the side of his face and clocks him off his feet onto the wet grass. I see the coast is clear now and make my way to the parking lot. He's dazed and now angry and yells at me, "Why didn't you warn me?" I look at him and replied, "You told me not to tell you where to walk." Then proceeded on my way as he tried to get up and get his bearings while still cursing at me because all of that was my fault apparently. With a person like that who in their own mind is clearly never going to be at fault for something, that's when you start pointing and laughing at them as you walk away. Just try to make them feel as small and dumb as possible. Enjoy the schadenfreude of this never wrong old jerk. Jay Chang wrote, "A friend of mine hit an old lady who had to be in her 80s when he was teeing off. It was a total fluke. She was walking perpendicular to the throw, but a gust of wind caught the edge of the disc, changing its downward trajectory straight for her face. All of a sudden, we see her grab her head and blood pour out from under her hand. Ambulance had to take her, but the medic said it was just bad luck and to go on playing through." Our next story is, make the Aussie go to theater. So this happened 20 plus years ago and it still makes me laugh. I'm an Australian radiographer who was working in the UK NHS. There was this older radiographer, Susie, who told me she hated locum radiographers and particularly hated Australians. Sadly, I was guilty of both. Susie generally tried to make my life hard, but regularly failed to succeed. All the staff liked me and I thoroughly enjoyed the work and the people I worked with. Susie also did her best to avoid doing any activity at all. She was disliked by nearly all in radiology, including the supervisor. One Friday afternoon at a work meeting, the supervisor radiographer informed us all that a new pain clinic service would start Monday in the operating theaters, and a radiographer was required to go for 4 to 6 hours each Monday. Now, most radiographers I know are not overjoyed at doing theater work. You stand around in a lead gown for hours pressing a button occasionally. Some love it, but I think it's okay sometimes. Susie quickly yells out, "I'm definitely not doing that. Make the Aussie go. He's getting paid enough." Everyone stopped and looked at me and I just said sure. No dramas. Come Monday, I attended theater at 9 a.m. and met the loveliest pain specialist and his nurse. They made the whole day great. Here's the thing. I would do a case and then the pain specialist would say he didn't need me for the next case and could I go to the tea room and wait. I actually spent most of the day in the operating theater tea room eating biscuits, drinking tea, and reading the newspapers. I would generally come down from theater for about 2 p.m. where I would be met by the supervisor radiographer who would tell me to take my lunch hour, plus my morning tea break. I would return about 3:30 p.m. just in time for my afternoon tea break, and then actually do some work from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Meanwhile, Susie has been assigned to the general X-ray department doing ward work, slogging away all day. This went on for months until I moved on. The last week I was there, the supervisor radiographer sent another radiographer to theater for pain clinic, and it was discovered what my working life on a Monday had entailed. Susie was livid and demanded she would go to pain clinic, but the supervisor reminded her she had refused previously. To be fair, the premise alone does seem kind of boring. At least I guess when you're doing ward work, although you're slogging away, you're kind of being active, right? You're engaging your brain. If you are in a place where you're just kind of standing around idly trying to be an assistant, on paper, it definitely sounds worse than it was. but I'll definitely take the tea room any day. Sigmund14 wrote, love that the title is so vague that I thought this would be about a totally different situation. Nice work hiding that easy life from Susie. Our next story is, don't want to hear? Okay. About the middle of last year, I needed a surgery, had an inguinal hernia which needed to be fixed. I tell my coworkers that I'll be sick for like 3 to 4 weeks. They're fine with that. I tell that to the head of the laboratory. He's fine as well. Now to quickly tell my boss, or so I thought. I started, hey boss, just want to tell you something about some sick days. She interrupts me. Oh, you don't need to. I say, see, the thing is, she interrupts me again. Listen, I don't really care about sick days. Got it? Now go away. I say, okay, boss. This was the last day of work before the surgery. So after the surgery, still a bit dizzy in the head, I take my cell phone and call my boss. I say, hey boss, just want to let you know I won't come for the next 3 to 4 weeks. I just had a surgery. The boss replied, what? You need to tell me those things. It is very important that I know such things, blah blah blah. Me, with all the calmness I had, said, well boss, I tried to tell you twice. After the second one, you said that you don't care. Silence, silence, silence. Boss? Boss replies, get well soon, and hangs up on me. I think in the future she will listen to things about sick days. If somebody taking any extended amount of time off is important, they shouldn't shoo them away when they start bringing up stuff like sick days. M. Flo Grasso wrote, this was the last day of work before the surgery. Was this an emergency surgery? This says you waited until the last day of work before your surgery and 3 to 4 week absence to tell people, including your boss, about this? Yes, the malicious compliance is there, but if that timeline is accurate, that was a real jerk move on your part for not telling people who will need to take care of your responsibilities while you're gone. Our next story is, all the soup you can stand. Was reminded of this story today about my in-laws. When my wife was a kid, my father-in-law joined a bulk warehouse club, like Costco, and came home with a giant case of split pea soup mix. My mother-in-law then proceeded to make and serve split pea soup for every meal until the case was empty, which my wife remembers taking about 6 weeks. Father-in-law did no more grocery shopping at the bulk warehouse. I'm gonna stand up for that father. That might have been a really good deal on a giant container of split pea soup. Regardless of the fact that it's split pea soup and you may have differing opinions on whether or not that's enjoyable. You never know, the apocalypse could have broken out and guess what? They'd have a gallon of split pea soup to rely on. Kick wrote, I've heard of split pea soup since I was probably 6 years old in TV shows, movies, cartoons, but never actually seen it or had it. I've always been curious though because I always imagined that meant every pea had to be split in half. How does it actually work? Are you supposed to slice every pea? That seems quite tedious. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another awesome malicious compliance story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.